I'm Rob Keith, VP and partner here at Salesforce Ventures and based here in sunny San Diego. It's been awesome to host you in my hometown the last few days. And I'm really excited about this next panel. I definitely think it's a topic that's top of mind for many founders here and for companies in the enterprise, generative AI. As we heard in the previous sessions, 2023 was a year of experimentations and POCs for a lot of companies. And we believe 2024 is the year that stuff starts to go into production, enterprises start putting applications into action. So I'm really excited about the guests that we'll have on stage today and to provide us the latest update on what's going on in the industry. So I'd like to welcome Cris, Vipul, and Richard to the stage. Put your pinky razor to the moon. Girls, what y'all trying to do? 24-karat magic in the air. Awesome. Maybe to kick things off, I'd love to get a show of hands. How many founders in the audience were beginning to think about generative AI this time last year in their product roadmap, in their strategy, or from a competitive landscape perspective? Okay, now fast forward today, how many companies are thinking about incorporating generative AI into their businesses? So I think it's definitely a good turnout, and I think it's definitely something that's top of mind that we hear for customers. I think maybe to kick things off, I'd love to hear just a quick elevator pitch from each of you on kind of where your businesses are focusing on today and kind of what is your mission of each of your companies. Cris, do you want to start us off?
Sure. I'm Cris. I'm the co-founder and the CEO of Runway. We're building a new kind of creative suite, and for that we build research models and infrastructure and everything that we need to create new tools for filmmakers and artists and musicians and designers and everyone who wants to tell something with our software. We've been building this for almost like 5 years now, and so a lot of learnings in the way. Yep.
Awesome. Vipul?
Hi, I'm Vipul Ved Prakash, co-founder and CEO of Together AI. Together AI is a high-performance, production-grade cloud platform for building with open source models. And we started the company about 2 years ago with the sort of premise that there is going to be a big ecosystem around open source and custom models. And as the closed model labs are building developer platforms around their models, we are building a developer platform for everything else. And we also take a very deep research focus and a research approach to this, especially on, these are large models and performance is really important. So we do very fundamental work on making this faster, and that work has a direct impact on economics and scaling. So we are putting all this together, and today we have, we launched about 8 months ago. There's about 50,000 developers building on the platform. We provide access to over 200 open source models and really exciting, projects and companies being built on it.
Hey everyone, nice to see you all. I'm Richard, I run U.com, and U.com is an AI assistant that you can chat with to get amazing answers. We're the first to connect large language models to the web at the end of 2022 so that they're more accurate, up-to-date, and give you citations for the answers. We used to be purely focused on the consumer side, but similar to ChatGPT and Anthropic's Claude and Bing.com, and eventually, end of last year, realized that really most of the revenue is going to be in B2B because we just kept getting folks reaching out saying, I love your product, I want to use it in my own company. And so we started offering APIs and now full integrations for empowering your own company to give amazing answers to your customers.
Awesome. Maybe, Richard, I'd love to start with you. Having been a founder 10 years ago in the AI space with MetaMind, and now being a founder today with U.com, what are the biggest differences, similarities, challenges to being an AI founder then and now?
I think the biggest difference back then is that you had to educate people of why they would want to have an AI solution for something. And the biggest challenge now is to choose your AI solution in the sea of thousands of others. And there are few companies, eventually Salesforce bought us and became chief scientist at Salesforce. And that was one of the few companies that was seeing that trend before many others had. But it was a lot of education. And then the problem back then was also that it was a very general purpose technology that was kind of coming up, and you had to still choose very specific actual entry points that help people understand what this can really do for them. Whereas now, a lot of times, customers come and be like, I think like chat can do something for me, and you have to still help them kind of get there. And now, I think the challenge is to not just be stuck in POC land, but actually get into production scale use cases. And that's where companies really appreciate talking to us, because they see we have millions of users, we give millions of answers every day that are actually accurate to customers, and it's running live in production, versus like, okay, this is like a neat POC partner for us.
Definitely. Maybe Cris and Vipul, as you mentioned, like 2023 was the year of experimentations and POCs, people trying out different models, different use cases and applications. What are the biggest, I guess, for enterprises, what are the top priorities and challenges to kind of bridge that gap from experimentation to getting stuff into production? Maybe some case studies or customers or lessons learned from selling into the enterprise today.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it all depends on the problem and the industry and what you're actually trying to get done with these models. At least for us, we do work a lot with agencies and production teams and media companies and filmmakers, and there are different parts of the process that you can make better, automate, or kind of like simplify with some of the models that we have. And I think one of the biggest things that takes just time to ramp up is to fully understand how to best use those models. Because sometimes it requires to do your job slightly different from what you've done it before. And specifically for the folks that we work with, sometimes creatives are very obsessed with the way they've always done stuff, and they're very religious about it. And so helping them transition into other forms that are still helping them get their job done, but faster, requires like some sort of training, like human training, not model training. And that's actually what we have in Runway. We have a team of specialists that help people on board into the tools that we have, because they operate with a different set of principles of many of the tools that we used in the past. And so really, it's a really like a human training, mental models updates that we have to do collectively that I see companies starting to do better now.
Definitely. And Vipul, I know you were previously at Apple. Like, any lessons learned that you take now onto your Together journey on kind of what a great enterprise deployment looks like?
You know, I think one of the things that we're seeing with enterprises we're working with, that the ones that are really successful in building features, especially features for their customers, tend to have, you know, head of AI, for example. They have AI teams. They may not be very big, but they're fairly focused and they're fairly empowered. And you know, this is how we do scope the companies we'll talk to are the ones who have a very serious effort behind this. And I think they're succeeding. They are able to do a lot of experimentation and then select the particular features and frameworks that will work for them. And you're seeing that this, I think 2024, we will see a lot more AI features and capabilities show up in, you know, SaaS software and consumer software as a result.
Definitely. I think one of the also interesting things we're seeing from reports is that budgets, at least from last year on the AI side, have gone from anywhere from 2 to 5x increase in stepfold, and definitely seeing massive opportunities behind it. But one of the issues we're seeing is kind of the ROI and kind of quantifying the business use cases. I guess, Richard, being at U.com and kind of from your Salesforce days, like, how can you work with enterprises to kind of quantify the ROI and the budgets here?
Yeah, you know, it is a quite horizontal like capability, and so we're seeing very different answers across different industries. There's some chatbots out there that also have millions of users that want their chatbot to be up to date, so they're using us to get all the answers that require up-to-date news about, you know, your customers. Work with Salesforce, for instance, so that Einstein Copilot, when you ask like who are the competitors of this account, which isn't data that's necessarily inside your CRM, or what's new with their CEO, and give me some news before I go into a meeting, these kinds of use cases we empower, and so our chatbot just becomes part and takes over some of the answers of someone else's chatbot. But then in our quest sort of to keep pushing the accuracy further, we've developed what we call research mode. You can try it out on U.com, works on mobile too. And research mode will write these very long, comprehensive reports where everything has a citation, and if you click on the citation, it doesn't just send you to the website where it found that fact, but it actually scrolls down and marks exactly which sentence it found that fact in. And what that enabled a bunch of companies to do is to actually replace like people writing research reports. And so now we're getting a bunch of interest from biotech companies and pharma companies and life sciences companies who basically told us like, we're willing to spend $200 for 1,000 API calls because this would take us, in some cases, like $10 to $1,000 to build that kind of research report that we now get in 20 seconds from you. And that is just like a pricing discovery we're going through right now, where we're going from like fractions of cents of LLM tokens to like hundreds of dollars for a few thousand API calls because the accuracy is just so much better and the whole search plus chat stack kind of work well together. So I wish I had a final answer, but like there's still a lot of discovery going on in the space for sure. But these companies are getting paid for research reports, and it's very close to their core business to automate creating these research reports, and that's always helpful. Versus like, there's a fun POC, you want to explore and try out something. Same with these chatbot companies. They're making revenue with their chatbots, and like being directly in there is very helpful. So I would encourage all the startups that are thinking about this to really think about workflows that are close to how your customer actually makes revenue.
Definitely. And I guess, Vipul, how are you working with startups and enterprises, to sell about working with open source and getting them to commit to working with open source and investing in that from a business case?
I think for many enterprises, I think open source is the only solution because they are training these models on their own data. They want to run them in a particular secure environment. They want to own the results of the model. So I think there's a class of companies where this is sort of the way, and that works very well for us. I think there is another class of companies who are starting their POCs on closed models. And once they're scaling their applications, they care about sort of performance and costs. And typically open source, especially combined with all the optimization and performance work that we do, that cost difference can be fairly stark. And that sort of becomes an easy illustration for us to, and I think there is going to be a lot of the companies are using multiple models. They're using closed models, they're using open models in ensembles, and I suspect that is going to be the future direction that these ecosystems will exist next to each other.
Definitely. I think, Richard, you had an interesting point earlier about models will end up just being like databases, or there'll be thousands across organizations, proprietary, custom, open source. But maybe to expand on that kind of analogy.
Yeah, so a lot of folks are asking us and me how I think about open source and so on, and which LLM is going to win. And I think over time, we're going to saturate how well LLMs can generate useful answers. And then it's much more similar to how we think about databases right now, which is no one asks how's your database, what's your database strategy? It's like, of course you're going to have a database somewhere, and I don't really care. All right, and if you're a small project, you probably use some open source MySQL database, like you would use an open source model like off the shelf right now. And then the more sophisticated you get, the more eventually you may end up on Oracle databases, right? And so, but it doesn't really matter what your database is, it matters more what you put into it and all the workflow that you build around it. And so you could call some major companies, like Salesforce is an Oracle wrapper, right? But no one says that because there's so much value in how you use the database that is actually much more relevant than the database itself. And so I think we're going to move into that. And in terms of open source models, they're probably going to stay about 6 to 12 months behind some of the very best multi-billion-dollar company closed source models. But they'll keep catching up, keep getting closer and closer. And the truth is, most companies don't need to have the best LLM. If you just want to have a service bot or specific answers for your industry vertical, you can have an open source one that you fine-tuned on your vertical and on your own data, and you don't need the best LLM out there. And that does save you a lot of money, and that's, I think, where most companies will go to in the future.
Yep. I think another interesting thing we've been seeing in this space is kind of the current ongoing AI talent wars. Some of the feedback we've heard from enterprises that implementing AI, you kind of need specialized AI talent that they currently lack in-house. And I feel like this talent gap is further exacerbated from the likes of OpenAI and some of these other companies poaching top researchers or engineers from Google and paying upwards of $10 million a year for this talent. I guess, Cris, question for you, like, how are platforms like Runway helping kind of democratize AI technology to enable enterprises to kind of upskill their workforce? And kind of how do you see startups kind of bridging that talent gap?
Yeah, that's a great question. I agree, it's very competitive. That's no doubt. I think it depends on what you're trying to optimize for. I do think there are, broadly speaking, two types of talent these days in the field. There's what I call the explorers, where researchers who are very good at coming up with new techniques, novel approaches. They're opening the space of what's possible. And that happens, there's a small group of people in the world that can do that, that can think beyond the current set of the models and can implement new techniques to augment capabilities of models in different domains and modalities. And then there's another type of folks and people who are much more like optimizers. And optimizers are, you can take an architecture or a system, and it's so new, it's so novel, that you just need to spend time like tweaking stuff and kind of like running experiments. And you're obsessed with like one particular thing, and you try to do many different things to see what works. And sometimes these people don't come from like a research background. They're just really good engineers. They're very curious. It's a whole new space, so no one has really explored it before, so there's no domain experts, which leads the opportunity for folks who are from different disciplines to kind of like try to do it. And we've hired some of the best folks we've hired for particular aspects of the product that we need to optimize or models that we need to improve have actually don't come from research. And it became such a common like thread that a few months ago we launched this program called Acceleration Program, which is designed for engineers who have no experience working on ML that want to go deeper into that. And so we basically support them and we make them understand research or understand the research environment in a way that they can contribute faster. Because I think a lot of the pool of talent hasn't yet been explored, and a lot of the folks haven't yet been discovered. A lot of the people and the jobs might not even like exist yet because we're inventing those as we go. And I think that's similarly to what is going on right now with some of our customers and clients, where the people I was telling you about before that we have that helps our companies and our customers understand the use cases of Runway, how you can use it, what it helps you. Those are roles and titles we came up with. They don't exist because no one before had the need of understanding how to use video models for like film production. And so I've started to see that now happening inside companies, where there are titles and people who are experts who are coming from small communities of creatives who now have specialized titles in agencies and production teams and Hollywood studios. And so I think it's a good like way of driving better adoption because it helps you just answer questions faster and also explore like the frontiers of what you can do with it.
Definitely. And I guess, Vipul, on the other side of that, you've done a great job kind of amassing some great talent, but on the research and engineering side, like what strategies have you used to kind of go up against the big tech giants and be able to recruit folks out of companies and together?
You know, we are fairly counter-positioned from big AI labs. We publish, publish open source software, we publish data sets, we publish techniques. And there are bits that we keep close that are sort of our competitive differentiators. But I think there's a lot of interest in the research communities to sort of share their learnings and knowledge, and that was sort of the norm for the field. So folks who are interested in pursuing that tend to join our team, and once you have a certain critical mass and interesting research directions internally, I think it becomes easier to attract people who are interested in that, working in that area.
Yeah, I think we had an interview a couple of weeks ago I said, historically, the last decade, we saw companies with product-led growth. I feel like this next generation is going to be research-led growth, where open source research is really driving customer acquisition, talent acquisition, brand acquisition.
Right.
And I really think what you all are doing is definitely kind of pushing the industry forward. Maybe to talk about some of the kind of live case studies we've seen in the last few months, we've seen companies like Klarna report significant cost improvements with an OpenAI kind of customer service chatbot that was able to do the work of 700 customer support agents and allegedly save up to $40 million of OpEx. On the other hand, we've seen companies like Air Canada that had a chatbot that was hallucinating and giving false refund information to clients, and the courts actually ruled that Air Canada had to pay those refunds to clients based on the hallucinations of the chatbot. So maybe Cris, based on your experience working with enterprise customers, what are some of the more exciting enterprise use cases you're seeing across your clients today in kind of the entertainment and media industry?
Yeah, that's great. I think what happens that's different from perhaps other domains and industries is that in media and entertainment and art and filmmaking, hallucinations are great. They are. I mean that's like imagination in a way.
Yeah.
It's like there's some relationship with you being able to venture into the unknown and create new worlds that's actually very rewarded and very hard to find. In other cases, of course, it's like refunds. You don't want the model to hallucinate. Also, I wouldn't want the model to hallucinate with your bank accounts or other domains. But so in creative, actually, a lot of what we're trying to do is provoke the models to become much more co-pilots of your own process, your creative process. And the best way to think about it, at least for our particular set of customers, is don't think about jobs that are gonna get changed or replaced with this. Think about the tasks. What tasks are you currently doing in film, in editing, in post-production, in pre-production, that it's expensive, time-consuming, and really boring? And there's hundreds of those. The process it's full of inefficiencies because it's built on how media used to work 25 years ago. And so if I come to a video editor or visual effects or an art director and I'll tell them you can do the same thing you're doing in 2 minutes instead of 2 weeks, that's great. Why not? I mean, that will save me so much time, and now I can work on other stuff. And so that's, I think, always the nice hook when you want to focus on adoption within those companies, and also thinking about, I guess, some of the things that are really useful for them.
Yeah, I like the use case around finding kind of places or jobs where there's a lot of manual work, a lot of services in these roles and workflows. Because we've been hearing from the shift from on-premise to cloud, it was really taking software and turning it into software. But in the shift from cloud to generative AI, it's taking services and turning it into software. And so I feel huge opportunity in industries there that are untapped today. And Richard, I guess, maybe on the hallucination side, how are you working with enterprises to ensure that their chatbots or their applications that they're building aren't hallucinating to kind of avoid these Air Canada use cases?
Yeah, there are a couple of other ones. There's an even worse one that came out this weekend that I tweeted about, which is in New York City, the city of New York City, had a chatbot they worked together with Microsoft on and basically told people to break the law. It was really bad. They're you can discriminate people if they need housing assistance. You don't need to let them move into your house. It said terrible things that were illegal. And so I tried the same questions, and they just worked on U.com. And I'm like, man, I need to up my enterprise sales game and speed up before Microsoft ruins the space for everyone, right? Because at some point people are like, yeah, chatbots just don't work, right? And then that hurts the entirety of the space. And so the tricky bit for chatbots that actually are accurate is that you need to have a good search backend to it, right? You ask a question, you have a list, we have tens of billions of documents in our index. Most companies have 50 to a couple 100,000 documents. And if you ask a question, you first want to retrieve the right document. And then you want to take the documents and then various paragraphs from that document, and you feed that into the LLM. And then the LLM doesn't become the answer generator, but it becomes the summarizer of all of that, and the reasoning engine that sits on top of those facts. Maybe 2 or 3 different documents came together, you combine logically like facts from multiple of these documents, and then you give a right answer, and then you have to have a whole subsystem that basically has citation logic. There's some companies that just add random citations behind random sentences and claim like, oh, this is a citation, and you click on it and it doesn't actually show that fact. But you can have a separate AI module that basically writes the right citations and checks also if there are 2 different citations that say the same thing, then you can, basically show that this fact is true multiple times, and that helps you build even more trust with them. And then maybe one last one is, as you have a conversation, because it's not just one question, but you ask multiple questions, you have another AI system that basically does what we call query rewriting. Imagine you ask about, Salesforce and their stock price, and you're like, okay, what was the highest market cap? And then 3 questions later, you ask, who's their CEO? Now, if you send who's their CEO to your search backend, it's not going to return any useful results, because your search backend doesn't know about the rest of the conversation. But you also can't send thousands of words into your search system, because then you also don't get useful documents back. And so you have to basically build all of these different modules around it. And at some point, we call it like an LLM operating system almost. Yes, you need to have a CPU deep down that actually does the computation, but that CPU by itself isn't that useful. It needs an Ethernet connection so you can go on the internet. It needs a hard drive so you can actually store facts and retrieve them. You need to have apps that sit on top of it. Like when you asked U.com about the stock price, we decided the best answer here, as much as I love natural language processing and have for many years, is not a bunch of text where maybe 1 or 2 numbers are hallucinated. The best answer for a stock price question is just a stock ticker. Right? So you can eventually choose multimodal chats. And I think the rest of the whole sort of chat world is just slowly catching up to some of those innovations we've been working on for a while.
Yeah, no, definitely. I guess moving maybe to the competitive landscape a bit, as that seems to be ever shifting. I guess, Cris and Richard, you've both been described as in David versus Goliath battles in your industries. Cris, you with OpenAI, Richard, you with Google and Microsoft, I guess. How do you stay competitive and differentiate yourselves as a founder and as a startup when you're going against a much larger kind of rival in your industries?
I like being the underdog. I think just being true to what you're really good at and focusing on that. We started building Runway when few people thought it was worth doing, and now it's getting to a point where it's getting really competitive. And so we're proud of being the first, but it doesn't mean that we will be always the first if we don't take it seriously enough. And so in a way, competition, I think, from other big companies is great. It moves innovation forward. It allows your team to have much more urgency and agency as to what needs to get done and how fast you need to do it. And now you're racing. You're not alone anymore in the thing you're trying to do. And so you're still small, you're still lean, you're still fast, you can still do it. I think a startup is basically obsessed with challenges like this and being able to solve them. I think the mistake is to think that you're gonna solve it once and then you're done. It's more of this is gonna happen now every 6 months, and you need to get really good at doing it every single time. And so for me, it's the most exciting thing that can happen to have more people thinking about this stuff we're thinking about.
Yeah, I think the official right answer is you focus on a smaller niche, right? And then you're a bigger fish in a smaller pond until you can very much dominate that pond. And that's certainly one aspect of it. For us, it's also just constant innovation. We're the first to connect chatbots and put LLM answers in a search engine in early 2022, 6-12 months before ChatGPT came out. Then we're the first to connect LLMs to the web so that they're actually up to date and have citations. Then we're the first to make them multimodal, so you have these apps like stock tickers and so on within chat results. Then we're the first to make it smart and personalized. So if you say, I have 3 kids and I love hikes, and then 2 months later you ask, what should I do in Hawaii on my vacation? They'll recommend you some hikes, right? And so all of these things are things that where others are catching up, usually 3 to 12 months later. And part of me felt we're screwed as a startup because everyone keeps catching up to our stuff. But then I realized you just can't stop, no matter how dominant of a player you are. You look at Salesforce. Salesforce has to reinvent itself also with AI, right? It's like, it's not like you can just sell the same Service Cloud offering that you were, the biggest player in the world in 5 years ago, like in 5 years from now, right? Service Cloud will get a lot of AI automation and has to also change. So at some point I went from like, oh man, this is a really terrible thing that we constantly have to innovate, to this is just the way businesses always work. And our industry moves even faster than usually industries do, but that's also why it's exciting. But yeah, you have to constantly innovate.
I love that. One question we're always thinking about is in terms of the new AI stack, where does the value accrue, right? Both from an investment and both from a founder perspective. We've seen different layers of the stack start to emerge, whether it's the foundational models, the middleware, the data layer, and then the application. I'm curious, I would love to get all your perspectives on where do you think is the biggest moat and kind of the value capture in the stack, or which parts of the stack might become commoditized over time? Maybe Vipul, would love to start with you.
I think today it definitely feels sort of like a barbell-shaped distribution, that you have value accruing at the foundational infrastructure layers, from chips to data center to clouds to foundation models, and then value being captured by sort of really high value applications on the top. I think it's going to be fairly different from software. This is, you're decoding tokens in a GPU and sending them to the user, and that sort of corridor of value from chip to user is just very, very short here, and I think that is going to continue to be true. So and part of Together's sort of bet is that foundational layers will become more and more important over time. But I think it's really early innings to actually say where the value will accrue.
Yep. Cris?
I kind of agree. It's super early, to be honest. It might feel like we're reaching some sort of like acceleration stage, but really I think it's just the beginning. And I think one of the hardest things to do, both in product, in investing, or in research building, is avoiding local maximums. You might see stuff that sounds really great and it's a good opportunity and there might be growth, but if you put in the perspective of the slope of change, it's like not going to be like worthwhile like spending a lot of time, because it's going to be obsolete in like 12 months. And so then avoiding those local points is like really like the challenge for everything, for infrastructure, for compute, for companies, for products, for all of it. So I think it's still early to decide.
Yeah, I think when you invest, there's one great phrase from Jeff Bezos where he thought, everything is changing and everyone keeps asking him, like, oh, what's next, like in the next couple of months? And he said, actually, what maybe you should think about is what isn't going to change. What is going to be the same in 10 years? And in his case, it was people are never going to say, now or in 10 years, I want longer delivery times or higher prices. Right? So for him, it's just like, let's just always try to make it as fast and cheap as possible to deliver products. And in our case, it's like people are going to want to have accurate answers and amazing answers all the time. And so that's one way to focus on it. Now, I think LLMs, in terms of value creation versus value capture, I'm kind of worried about some of the open source companies that have been able to raise basically like almost unicorn seed rounds, where you still have all that seed stage risk, but you have at most as an investor sort of late stage returns, and at best or just completely it goes to zero. And if I was a pure open source kind of company and I gave these LM models out, we saw this with Stability and others, it's really hard to actually, you created value because the world now has an amazing open source LM, but it's very hard for you to capture that value. And so what we're seeing, one very concrete thing is the data that feeds into these. So one of our offerings is the web index that is built for LLMs in mind. So if you have your own LLM and you don't want to use any of our LLMs, then you can just use our web index to get up-to-date information of news and other data sources on the web. And so this data is actually where we closed our first $1 million ARR deal. It's just data for LLMs. Then we show you, well, this data layer is also built for LLMs, and hence it's better than what you would get from like a Google or a Bing API. And so that is, I think, going to continue to be true. If you're a company and you're accruing data and you're creating some kind of virtuous cycle of selling a product that while users using it is creating more data that will then make a better AI. That is kind of the most ideal setup for most companies in the future.
Before we open it up to questions, I'd love to do a couple rapid fire topics for you all. I guess first to kick it off, looking over the next 24 months or so, would love to get kind of a hot take on what do you think is the biggest breakthrough we see in kind of the AI space that has impact not only on businesses but consumers, whether that's a research breakthrough, company breakthrough. Would love to get your thoughts, Cris.
Wow, in the next 12, I think predicting at this stage is really hard. I'll go with long-form video generation, like live action long-form video generation is going to be possible very soon.
Vipul?
I think, very long memory and context. We're seeing those models produce really interesting applications and results and can kind of track users and processes over a long period of time and have that context. And I think that's going to be very exciting.
At the very core, large language models are sequence models. They take a sequence of tokens and they try to predict the next word. And it turns out predicting the next word is incredibly powerful because you need to learn everything about the world to do that well. Like you have a sentence you see on the internet, your LLM is training, and it says, oh, I was in New York City and I drove north to. Now, just to predict that next word being more likely to be Boston or Montreal or Yale, you have to kind of know geography, right? And now imagine an LLM trained on all of the internet and on all the sentences to predict that next word. So next token prediction is a super powerful idea. Now, everyone agrees on that when it comes to English words and English tokens, but the next couple of exciting examples are going to be video, sound, music. Everyone can now be a poet. Soon everyone will also be able to be a musician. And it's more like the creativity will be higher and more abstract and less about the sort of execution of your ideas, right? The high-level creativity and having new ideas that you then work together with the AI will become more important. And in terms of other interesting sequences, I think one of the biggest ones is going to be sequences of clicks and actions. What does that mean? Instead of predicting just the next word, you can predict the next word and which button you should be clicking in that interface, right? And then you click in this text box, you fill it out, and you click on 5, 10 more buttons. And then before you know it, if you now see this is an email that came in, and then this is the sequence of all the clicks, and then the email was archived and the case was closed, all of a sudden you can start automating more and more complex tasks with sequence models of actions. And I think another really interesting one on the sequence models will be sequences of amino acids, proteins essentially. Proteins govern everything in life and in sickness and health and in our bodies. So if you have control over the language of proteins, you can change all of medicine. And there's a paper we published in 2018 at Salesforce in my research group, and that line of work has created multiple like $100 million plus companies and startups already, and I think they will change like medicine as we know it massively. It's going to be super exciting. Sorry, I'm really bad at keeping it short.
No, it's very, very exciting to see where the future's going. Maybe to round it out, if someone handed you a laptop and said it's done, here's the AGI, what would you ask it?
My taxes? Can you do my taxes? Hate it, yeah.
As a startup idea, someone can do their taxes.
Yeah. I think counter to that is that if AI progress were to stop today, and these are the best models we have, I'd bet that we'd make amazing applications over the next 10, 20 years. So there is a part of this which is you require human creativity and ingenuity to turn these models into useful applications.
I think one of the biggest exciting breakthroughs will eventually come from using AI for science. If you read or are now watching the 3-Body Problem, which I encourage you all to do, it's a super exciting series of books. And often sci-fi kind of shows us both the worst case scenarios, but sometimes, at least in my case, as an optimist and technological optimist, like I see the excitement because the Trisolarians, they actually had incredible technology, right? They could move much faster through space at close to the speed of light. They have much better control over their biology, over multiple dimensions and folding space into different dimensions. And when you think of all these ideas, some of them sound like sort of crazy and like impossible, but there are a lot of things that could be so much more possible. And so I would ask this AGI all kinds of science questions, like how do we move close to the speed of light with real matter? How do we do quantum teleportation? How do we solve cold fusion? How do we solve all protein generations to solve cancer? I mean, like, there's so many exciting questions you could ask it.
Awesome. Well, let's open it up to see if the audience has any questions.
Thanks. Hey, Richard, you talked a lot about what sounded like RAG architectures and how you're taking data and the LLM is kind of the reasoning engine. But a few times you briefly talked about fine-tuning models and, any advice on philosophies of like when is it appropriate to fine-tune versus when is it appropriate to use a RAG approach? Just your thoughts there.
Yeah, I would love to hear the other folks' answers as well, but I actually think fine-tuning is a little bit overhyped. If you can very accurately and generalizable build one LM that knows when it knows and knows when to look up facts, and then knows when it actually found those facts. All of them are slightly different, but pretty crucially different in the stack. You don't need to fine-tune for a lot of use cases. Like, I looked at this example from Microsoft, right, where they failed in New York City, and like, I just asked U.com, and U.com knows when it looks up a fact and then finds it. And then sometimes it says, I don't know, I couldn't find this, like the search results don't answer your question, so I don't know if I have a good answer for it. And like, once you do that well enough, then oftentimes you realize you don't actually have to fine tune. So I think fine tuning, I wouldn't call it a fad, like there's still some cases where if you want to have a really, really small model and you know the world, like, and the knowledge, it can all be contained and doesn't change too often, maybe you can still fine tune a smaller model that may have to run just on the phone, right, or something like that. So there will be use cases for it, but for the vast majority of enterprise applications, I think RAG beats fine-tuning.
Vipul, do you have any thoughts?
Yeah, I think there's a class of applications for which fine-tuning makes a lot of sense. So we provide a fine-tuning API, and looking at the types of users. So there's clinical healthcare. There are companies that are building systems for doctors to file insurance claims and write back to their patients, and they're taking the sort of clinical history of the patient and their other all the other sort of data. What fine-tuning does is it will generalize better on the new data you're fine-tuning on. And if you don't need to do generalization, then you can use in context learning and long context, and that's kind of a faster and easier way to get to the answers. But I think there's a place for both.
So again, this question is on the small models, especially on enterprise use cases. I just wanted to see your prediction on enterprise use cases being driven more by orchestration of multiple small models focused on use cases versus the final end state being each enterprise, stabilizing on one really large LLM and, applications built on top of one large LLM. Just wanted to see, how you're seeing the direction for the enterprise use cases.
There's a fun analogy to humanoid robots, right? You can try to build a humanoid robot, and it's very exciting, very cool, very sci-fi, and there's certainly lots of applications for it. But if you now ask that robot to just every day wash thousands of dishes, you probably just better get a dishwasher, right? And that will be more efficient. That's a custom-made robot just for dishwashing. People don't call it that, but that's basically what it is. And then you realize if you really care about a highly scaled enterprise use case, it's almost always better to have a small model that just does exactly that. And even in a more complex scenario like U.com, where again people can ask us anything about like sports results from a game, the weather, the stock, but also company, like competitors, and so on. We need to have a very cheap, very fast model in the beginning to kind of guide the whole answer. Like, do they want a poem? I don't need a citation for every line of a poem to my wife for anniversary, right? But if I ask for company stock prices, I want very careful research done. And so there are a lot of a lot of these orchestration aspects, they are usually done by smaller, faster, and cheaper models.
Cris, any thoughts on that? I guess I'm curious too, with like potentially the iPhones now being able to run small models on it. I'm curious, what are the implications for like consumers and kind of unlocking creativity there when models can run on our phones?
Yeah, I would distinguish though the applications and the modalities. If you're looking for answers or for like specific information, maybe very different from like trying to create like long form video content, for example. I think there's still like a long way to go to be able to run like a 4K video model on your phone. I would love to do that. But it seems like a few breakthroughs need to happen because again, like most of even the idea that you can generate video with like language is 10 months old, which is the first model we put out, like was basically the first model ever that could do it. And so it's still like very early, and I think at some point you will definitely enter the optimization phase where like you could probably run it on device, but for now, large models will particularly be useful and will be winning on both image and video.
Awesome. Well, I think that's a great place to end it. Appreciate everyone's questions and appreciate Richard, Vipul, and Cris for the conversation. And
Cool.
awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.